Welcome back. Today we are going through lesson 1-2, which is all about operations and expressions. So remember, we are just kind of setting the foundations here for some key concepts that we're going to need to get through Algebra 2. So we talked last time about real numbers and their properties, and now we're going to use some of those real numbers to do some operations and expressions. So let's get into our order of operations first, and then we're going to do some practice. So the order of operations you've hopefully seen before, but the order it goes in is it starts with grouping symbols. So when we're doing our order of operations, we start with anything that is inside parentheses. So remember, those are the curved ones. Absolute value signs, which are your straight up and down lines. Brackets, which are kind of those squared off lines. Braces, which are the curvy ones, and or a fraction bar. So where we have something on top and something on the bottom, we need to simplify the numerator and the denominator before we do anything else. So we always start with those grouping symbols, and all of those represent grouping symbols. Then we're going to evaluate exponents or powers. So that could be anything to any power, or another version of an exponent is a radical, so a root of some sort. Square root, cube root, fourth root, anything like that. Once we've simplified those, then we move on to multiplication and division. And when we do those, we want to remember, this is the key part, that we always work from left to right. So a common misconception is that we just do whichever one is easiest first. You need to make sure you go from left to right. And then finally, same thing with addition and subtraction. We do it from left to right. All right, so we are going to use those order of operations to evaluate some key expressions here. So starting with this first one, we want to work inside the parentheses first. And when you're in the grouping symbols, you kind of are going through another set of order of operations. So the very first thing I need to simplify is the radical inside the root. So everything else stays the same, and I'm just simplifying that square root of 36. And then I can also go ahead and divide the 8 by 2 after the grouping symbols there. So we've taken care of that square root. Now let's take care of the rest of the parentheses. So we would add 6 plus 2 and get 8. All right, we have no exponents or radicals now left, so we move on to multiplication and division. So I have one set of multiplication here in the middle, so I'm going to simplify that first. And now I'm just down to addition and subtraction. Remember, we're going to work from left to right. So it has to go 30 minus 24, which is 6, and then add the 4 and get 10. All right, let's look at number 2 here. So for number 2, we have a little different set going on here. We've got some fractions. So again, those are grouping symbols. That means that I need to simplify one part before I move on to the next part. So on the first numerator, we'd get 60. And on that denominator, I'd get 12. And then it's minus, can't simplify the 45 at all, but I can simplify negative 3 squared to 9. All right. Now we can simplify those fractions. So 60 divided by 12, that gives us 5. And 45 divided by 9 is also 5. So this one reduces to 0 when we simplify there. All right, let's try 2 more. So this next one, we have a fraction, which means we need to simplify the numerator and then the denominator and then do our division. So I'm going to start inside those top parentheses by taking the square root of 49. And in the denominator, I can go ahead and do the 6 minus 10 and get the absolute value of negative 4. All right, then I can keep simplifying that numerator a little bit more. So I'd have negative 10 to the third power. And then in the denominator, the absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. So I've simplified the denominator as far as I can. Let's finish off the top here. So After grouping symbols comes exponents. So I'm going to do negative 10 to the third power and get negative 1,000. And then I can simplify that top one more time to negative 2,000 by multiplying, and then divide it by 4 finally. So the very last thing we do is that division once we've simplified everything. When I divide that, I get negative 500. All right, let's look at number 4 here. So we've got a lot going on. I'm going to focus first on my fraction. So 3 squared is 9 minus the absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5. So I can simplify that. And then working from left to right here, I can also simplify my radical. So the square root of 100 is 10. And I can take care of my exponent there. 4 squared is 16. And then we'll worry about dividing by negative 6 later. So we've gotten rid of most of our grouping symbols. We just need to finish off this fraction. So we have 4 divided by 2 minus 10 minus 2 times 16, and then divided by negative 6. Okay. So now we need to be careful and work multiplication and division from left to right first. So I'm going to divide. Can't subtract yet. I can multiply these two. So I'm going to get negative 32. And then that is going to be divided by negative 6. So when I divide 32 by negative 6, I am going to get a positive, and then 32 isn't divisible by 6, but I can certainly reduce it to 16 over 3. All right, so now I can subtract 2 minus 10 and get negative 8 plus 16 over 3, and then we need to combine those. I need to get a common denominator to add two fractions together. So I'm going to rewrite negative 8 as negative 24 over 3, and then add the 16/3 to it. So that's going to give me a negative 8 over 3 as my final answer. So lots of order of operations going on there. All right, so let's flip it over and look at a few more. All right, so we are going to continue doing this, but this time we're going to also evaluate our functions. So that means that when we're evaluating, we are going to substitute values in for the variable. And it's really important to enclose the substitution in parentheses. So whatever number you're plugging in for the variable, we're going to put it in parentheses. So here's what that looks like. For this first one, I am replacing the x's that I see with a 2. So again, enclosing it in parentheses. Negative 2 squared plus 2 times 1 plus 3, and then 1 minus 2 again, enclosing it in parentheses. And that should be good. Oh, I did a parentheses instead of a bracket there. All right, once we've substituted, now we're going to simplify with those order of operations. So let's simplify out in front here. I have negative and then 2 squared, so that would be a negative 4. Plus, now let's work inside our grouping symbols here. I have 1 plus 3 times negative 1. So we're working from the outside in here. That leaves me with negative 4 plus 2 times, let's see, we'd have 1 minus 3 when I evaluate that. Continuing inside my grouping symbols, I have 2 times negative 2. And that would be negative 4 minus 4, which is negative 8. All right. Number 6, we are substituting in here an a of 1/2 and b of 2. So we're going to do 1/2 minus 2. Again, encasing those in parentheses to make sure we don't lose anything. That's going to be squared times 1/2 plus 2. All right, so there's all my substituting. Let's go ahead and substitute, or I'm sorry, evaluate inside the parentheses first. So 1/2 minus 2, that is going to give me -3/2 squared. And then over here we have 1/2 plus 2, which would be 5/2. So combining those fractions a little bit to help us. All right, when I square this, -3 times -3 is 9, 2 times 2 is 4. And then we're multiplying that by 5/2. All right, when I multiply those together, I get 45 in the numerator and 8 in the denominator. And that would be my evaluated answer. Okay, number 7 here. So for number 7, we're substituting in -3 for m and 3 for n. So we have the absolute value of -3 times +3 plus -3 squared. Again, making sure I encase everything in parentheses so we don't lose anything. And then minus m. All right, so here we have the absolute value of -9 when I multiply those together. And when I do -3 squared, I get +9. And then I have +3 because I have a minus and negative. So that would be +9 plus 9 plus 3. And then working my addition from left to right, I have 9 plus 9 is 18. Plus 3 is 21. So number 7 would evaluate to 21. All right, number 8 here before we move on to the next thing. All right, we've got fraction going on here, and we're going to have to simplify that fraction when we substitute in -3. So let's write it out here. 3 plus 5 to the -3 plus 4 power. Closing off the absolute value, and then in the denominator, I have the square root of -3 squared plus 16, and then minus 29. All right, so let's simplify what we can here. This is going to be the absolute value of 3 plus 5. Let's see, -3 plus 4, that's the first power. So I'm just going to leave that as 5, because 5 to the first power is 5. In the denominator, let's simplify that square root. So I've got 9 plus 16 here, which is 25. And then minus 29. So when we evaluate there, we have negative, and then the absolute value of 8 would just be 8. So we've got -8 over square root of 25 is 5 minus 29. That's going to give me -8 over -24, which reduces to 1/3 as a final answer there. All right, so that is some evaluating with some order of operations. The last thing we're going to go through today is simplifying some expressions. So rather than evaluating them at a certain value of x, now we're going to combine like terms and use the operations to get a final answer as simplified as we possibly can in standard form. So looking at number 9 here, the first thing I can do is I can use that distributive property to distribute the -5 to x squared and to 2. So we multiply those together. And then I can also multiply the negative in the second set of parentheses. So -x minus 7. Then I'm going to combine like terms, which would be -10 and -7. So the -5x squared I can't do anything with, as well as the -x. But I can combine the -10 and -7 and get -17. So there's my standard form. All right, and then our last one here, let's go ahead and distribute again to start with. So I'd have -2x squared and -2y. And then writing out the rest of it, we are going to start looking for our like terms here. So sometimes when I have a lot going on, it helps me to kind of color code. So on this one, 4x cubed is the only x cubed term, so I can't combine anything with that. -2x squared, I can combine with +2x squared, and those cancel each other out. They're inverses, so I don't write anything for the x squareds because there's none left. Then I can combine the negative 2y and the positive 5y. That would combine to 3y. And then I still have this negative 3 on the end that I don't combine with anything, and I write like that. All right, so that is some basics around order of operations and what to do with expressions, how to evaluate them, and how to simplify them. We'll see you next time.